Rams fans, we've got a lot to discuss at a joint practice today against the New Orleans Saints. The Rams had their second joint practice of 2026 today, taking on Kellen Moore's group. They'll obviously be seeing them in this weekend's preseason game as well. We're going to break down everything that happened at joint practice, including the reason why they called this thing about an hour early on today's show, presented by Prize Picks as always. So let's start with the number one thing you got to talk about with this joint practice before we roll through kind of what happened on the field and the things that were said in media afterwards by the Rams that we need to discuss as well. But this practice ended an hour early. The reason why is pretty simple. The Saints are just dealing with too many injuries right now. They had some injury situations already coming into this one. Of course, that's the nature of the NFL. You're always going to be dealing with injuries. However, New Orleans' injury luck has been particularly poor this season. This was their second joint practice of the week. They practiced with the Cowboys on Tuesday. So they already got a little bit of joint practice action already, some kind of, upscaled reps, maybe you might say, already this week, and came out of that with some bumps and bruises. Today, they came out with a number of bumps and bruises. In the time that they were on the field, which again, an hour shorter than they were intended to be, 5 new injuries popped up for the New Orleans Saints, including to Cesar Ruiz, their starting center, and John Ridgway, who I believe is one of their left guards. So bad, very bad. No other way to say that for New Orleans. My heart goes out to Saints fans. I mean, it's just a tough thing to deal with. It's part of football. We all know that. But the last thing you ever want to see is injuries like this coming up in training camp practices, in joint practices. Hopefully those guys are all good. Hopefully they're able to bounce back. We haven't heard any timelines on any of them yet, or if they're particularly serious injuries. But all of that to say, essentially, I think Kellen Moore standing on the sideline watching this looks at his guys who are kind of dropping like flies and just says, no more. We got to call it. No more. And so they cut out a couple plays that they wanted to rep, and they cut out the 2-minute drill practice that they were going to do as well. So a lot shorter of a joint practice overall, but that doesn't mean there's nothing to talk about from what we did hear about on the field. So let's transition into that, because even though it was a shorter practice, for obvious reasons, understandable reasons, might I add. Obviously frustrating to lose reps against the Saints in a joint practice opportunity. This will be our final joint practice of 2026 as well. But at the end of the day, health is the most important thing for these two teams. And when you've got guys going down, it's so much more important to protect the guys you have left and protect anybody else from further injury than to try to just keep forcing it to get more reps. At the end of the day, reps aren't valuable if you've got nobody else left to play by the time the season rolls around. It's not getting to that point for the Saints, but they are in a position where depth is really compromised if some of these injuries end up being serious. So with all that being said, let's talk about what happened on the field. Biggest takeaway, biggest thing I'm hearing, good day to start from the Rams defense. I heard multiple PBUs from defensive linemen who were regularly creating pressure, collapsing Tyler Shuck's pocket, disrupting the timing for the Saints' number one offense. They got off to a pretty sluggish start, both through the air and on the ground. Ground game eventually able to kind of establish itself, but no Chris Olave out there for them, and no Jordan Tyson out there for them. So I just don't think their passing game ever really took off. All we were hearing about was PBUs. Kobe Turner had one where he was able to get his big arms up and knock the ball down. Braden Fisk had what would have been a sack. Some good plays from this Rams defense early on against a first-team offense in the New Orleans Saints. Of course, a first-team offense that's missing 2 of its biggest pieces as far as the passing attack goes. So worth noting on that front, but still good to see. Still good to see you guys go out there and kind of win the day against this first-team offense. On the other side of the football, Matthew Stafford and Davante Adams continue to cook. No Puka today, no Miles for the defense as well. I should have said that, although I kind of assumed that most of you all would know that if you've been following those situations. Those two guys still dealing with injuries. Miles' left knee soreness and Puka Soez. So neither of them participated today. A lot of Davante Adams, as we've heard throughout training camp, he just continues to ball. The connection between him and Matthew Stafford clearly taking another step this season in their second year of working together. It's very apparent that those guys are incredibly close, and the chemistry is, it's going to new heights this season. From what we're hearing out of training camp, from what the plays we're seeing these guys make, I cannot wait to see that duo on the field, because it was great last year, but I think we all know that there was kind of like a little bit of meat left on the bone, maybe as far as Davante goes. And I think this season, we're really going to see that not be the case. We're going to see Davante. I think like some people looked at last season and they go, well, Davante's just kind of taking steps back because he's getting older. I don't really think that's the case. I think he was just kind of settling in his first year in the Rams offense. Of course, I'm not saying he's still the same Davante from the peak of his powers, but I think we're going to see a much better version of Davante Adams. And that's not to say he wasn't great last year, which should scare NFL defenses. We'll keep talking about that, plus everything we heard out of media today at practice in just 1 second. But first, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of today's video, America's #1 sports picks app, the good people over at Prize Picks. Guys, I've got a lineup rolling today for some of the preseason action, so I want to walk you guys through it here. If you're not familiar with Prize Picks, they are the easiest way to play daily fantasy. All you have to do is pick 2 to 6 players, and you're selecting your daily fantasy lineup for the day, picking more or less on their stat projection. So, for example, I went with the more on Fernando Mendoza's yards and his passing touchdowns, and I went with the more on Jack Besh's receiving yards as well. I also took the more on John Stribling's receiving yards. I know he's a Niner, but he has been playing well. So at the end of the day, I think this is a lineup that's going to be able to green out for us. You guys can tell me, you can fade me, whatever you do, just do it with my friends over at Prize Picks. And if you're a brand new user to the Prize Picks app, make sure you take advantage of their new user offer. Right now, when you play your first $5 lineup, you can get $150 in bonus lineups if you win. Just use code HMA when you sign up. That is when you play your first $5 lineup, you can get $150 in bonus lineups if you win. Just use code HMA at sign up. One more time. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring today's video. We always appreciate them. All right, let's get back to discussing a little bit more out of joint practice. All right, so again, limited team-to-team reps, so not a ton of big takeaways from the overall on the field end of practice. The last thing I want to talk about as far as that goes is Terrance Ferguson, who was once again noted as making multiple catches. We don't have a game log out for this thing yet, and I don't know if we will get one just because it got called shortly. I don't even know if it'll be really worth putting one together for anybody out there, the way Nick Harris did last week for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram out of that Dallas Cowboys practice. We'll see if that one does come out. We'll break it down kind of like what we did last week. But Terrance Ferguson all over the football field again, made multiple catches over the middle of the field, specifically noted by Stu Jackson, who's doing a great job of live tweeting today. Shout out to Stu and Zach Edwards, who was live tweeting the defensive side of the ball. 2 good team reporters for the Rams there. But good to hear on Terrance Ferguson. I tweeted about it as well, just like, you know, the more you see this guy involved in these joint practices, the more you see him. I didn't play at all in the preseason last week. It's incredibly clear what this guy's role is intended to be in year 2. And the way McVay has spoken about him over and over and over again, including today, it's just so clear that like they see more in Terrance Ferguson than I think even your average Rams fan does right now. Like I've said this before, but I think the average Rams fan came away from Terrance Ferguson's rookie season a little bit disappointed. And I just don't think the Rams had any of that mentality about the way that year went. I think they're looking at this year as this is the year that this kid takes off. Last season, he spent a lot of time learning this playbook, growing his chemistry with Matthew Stafford. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. Were there growth areas? Of course there were, but we've grown this offseason. And I think we're all going to see that this year when Terrance Ferguson takes the field. Sean McVay talked about him today. He was asked by a reporter. A reporter said, it looks like Terrance Ferguson's playing with a lot of confidence on the practice field. He's making a lot of plays. And they asked Sean McVay what he's seen from the second-year tight end. And he said, just that. I think what can't be misunderstood or minimized is how smart this guy is. I think, like, again, McVay, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, he's known for building guys up, even when those guys maybe at times are not deserving of it, and it sometimes goes around to be like, that's some coach speak from Sean McVay. But the more we hear on Terrance Ferguson, the more we hear from not just McVay, but from everybody watching him out there, independent guys, team reporters, all noting, hey, Terrance Ferguson's having a big impact on things. Even guys from the Dallas Cowboys last week were noting like, hey, Terrance Ferguson, man, that guy had a day today against this Cowboys defense, which played well against the Rams offense. I think better than this Saints defense did today. So again, it just continues to encourage you about what that role is going to look like in year 2 for him. A big step forward. And I think it, again, speaks to the tight end usage overall. It's just going to be a huge factor of this offense. I know we've constantly talked about who's the third receiver in this offense to be that third option for Matthew Stafford. And again, I've said it before. I don't think the third receiving option is going to be a receiver. I think the third receiving option is Terrance Ferguson. I do. I really, really do. And we just get more evidence of that every single day. Okay. Couple post-practice media notes, really just two. Sean McVay said they're hopeful Keegan Tross can be back before week 1 in Australia. Tough setback for the rookie, but the hope is it's temporary. If he's not back by then, David Quessenberry should be the swing tackle. That is a tweet from Nate Atkins directly. And when I read that tweet, my immediate reaction, and I'll read it one more time. Sean McVay said they're hopeful Keegan Tross can be back before week 1 in Australia. Tough setback for the rookie, but the hope is it's temporary. If he's not back by then, David Quessenberry should be the swing tackle. Okay. So my immediate reaction was, okay, is Tross the starting swing tackle? And starting kind of a misnomer there because obviously he wouldn't be starting, but is he the first up for a swing tackle? Nate Atkins, when I tweeted that, I said, does this imply that Keegan Tross is the swing tackle for this team? I said it would be interesting if that was the case because of the fact that Quessenberry had been getting the first team reps at left tackle when Alaric Jackson had to miss due to treatments for his blood clots. Nate Atkins took the opportunity, and thank you, Nate, for doing this. Not a lot of beat reporters take the opportunity to clarify when fans ask questions, when content creators ask questions, so I appreciate that. He said, look, because when I asked that, he said, that's not really what was meant here. What is meant is that Trost is the backup right tackle and Quessenberry is the backup left tackle. In the event that Trost is unavailable, Quessenberry will swing. So Trost is not right now the number 1 swing tackle. I think it would be a whole different situation if maybe Quessenberry was unavailable. Does he then play in as the swing tackle? I would probably guess so. I think he's probably the direct backup to Quessenberry in that role. But as of right now, he is not the number 1 go-to swing tackle. So I just want everybody to kind of understand that's still Quessenberry's job at this point. Trost is the backup right tackle to Warren McClendon. But what I find interesting, and I don't know how the Rams will handle it, backup left tackle is an incredibly important position right now because as we talked about yesterday, on yesterday's show, Alaric Jackson's odds of getting suspended are incredibly high. Alaric Jackson's odds of missing time early this season are incredibly high. And this Rams team has to be prepared for that. So Trost or Quessenberry is going to become incredibly important here through one of two means. Because there's two ways you attack that problem if Jackson is suspended, is the way I see it. One, you take Warren McClendon from the right side and you say, okay, Warren, you played great filling in for Rob Havenstein last year. Can you fill in for Alaric Jackson on the left side of the line? You're going to play left tackle for us for the first couple weeks. Now we take Keegan Trost or we take David Quessenberry and we say, hey, we need you to play right tackle. And you start at right tackle for the beginning of the season. And now that would be my preferred way of going about things for really one core reason. If it works, if that's an offensive line combination, whether it's Quessenberry or Trost, hopefully it's Trost that can be that starting right tackle. If that's an offensive line combination that works, then why are we keeping Alaric Jackson after this season? Put it bluntly. Why? Like, if Warren McClendon can swing and play left tackle and start at that spot, extend him, pay him the bag, keep him around, and let's say goodbye to a guy who has had some serious issues during his time in Los Angeles off the field. That would be my thought process. If Alaric Jackson's suspended for 8 games and that offensive line combination works, there's a lot of cap savings you could get if you said, hey, you know what, Alaric? It's been some good moments on the field. It's been a lot of unsavory things off the field, at least alleged. I think it's time to move on. That would be my path if I'm the Los Angeles Rams. I would at least want to explore, can we make that work? Can we make that combination of offensive linemen happen in a pinch? Because if you can, then maybe it can keep working. And not only would you save cap, you'd also be, in my opinion, parting ways with somebody who has not done great things for your brand over the last couple of seasons. And again, allegations with Alaric Jackson. However, the reality is the reality. He agreed to a pre-filing diversion program. The odds that he's going to be suspended are very, very high. This is his second suspension under the NFL's personal conduct policy in his career. What is the tolerance for the Rams? I think we're going to find out as far as that goes. Lastly, Aaron Donald. And I saved this for the end because I don't want to come out of the gates being like Aaron Donald update, guys, because it's not really a big Aaron Donald update. And I get it. I hear you. I know. And I'm feeling it too. We're getting a little tired of the will they, won't they saga with Aaron Donald in the nonstop updates. I absolutely feel you on that. What I've got for you today, don't attack because this is not a solid update. Aaron Donald, according to Sean McVay, will do a couple more practices before a solid decision. So expect to see a few more reports of, hey, Aaron Donald is trying out for the Rams today. And like I've said in the past, we will continue to report on those things. I know it's frustrating sometimes. I know we all just wish he would sign the contract. I wish he would just sign the contract. I wish he'd just come back. But at the end of the day, he's his own man. He has the power to make this decision. He's given so many great things to this franchise. You got to let him hold his timeline. If he wants to hold this timeline, then that's his decision to do so. I know it can be tiring for us as fans to kind of like be on the edge of our seat at all times, but this is a real human being. He's not a Madden character. And he's got a big decision to make about what he's going to spend the next basic year of his life doing, whether or not it's going to be coming back to participate at the highest level of NFL football, go chase a Super Bowl with these guys, but what that would also mean for the family he has, for the young kids he has, for the wife that he has. There's more people involved in this than just Aaron Donald. It's a big decision for Aaron Donald to make. I know I've said all of these things before, and I'll probably end up saying them again before this is all said and done. But I just want to continue to reiterate. We'll cover every step of this process. I know, again, it can be a little frustrating getting updates that are not the update, but I think it's important to follow every step of this so that we know when this decision comes, we were there for the whole way through. We were there for the entire process. All right. That's going to do it. Speaking of the entire process of this video is now complete. So thank you for tuning in on today's episode of the Rams Report, an at-home episode. Of course, we'll be live this weekend on Saturday for our game against the New Orleans Saints. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and lock us in because I want to see you on Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific time for another, hopefully, big game from our guy, Ty Simpson. It should be absolutely super fun to watch. We will be there live with you guys having a blast just like we were last week. I'll see you then.